Guten Morgen. Good morning.
Good morning.
First, I would like to say that I have big problems with translating the German word zurechtführen. Adjusting listening is, I tried to translate, but it's not so easy.
I can assist you with
It's not only a problem with my English language, it is a problem with philosophy. And also, it's both. And so, with the begin, I like to have a question. What do you think about what I'll speak now? Will I speak about a sonic function model for microtone music? If you think so, please put up your hands short.
Or?
Do you think so?
Is it an either-or question?
A sonic function model for microtone music.
What is that?
This is the title. Will I speak about this?
Yes.
Yes? Yes? Okay, please take the program of the seminar.
Yes.
I have written it wrong. I wrote microtone instead of microtone.
Yeah. Okay.
So my first question is, why did you understand what I did not write? This is adjusting reading, what you did. Because our brain functions in this way. We can understand things which never are written, which never are played in details. We are able to understand what was meant, and also we can ignore the error completely, and we can reconstruct the meaning of the word. And similar, the human ear is functioning, especially sometimes with microtonal music. So I start with next little joke and play a composition, a part of a composition, and I ask you if you think that this could be my composition. What do you think about? Yes, it is Johann Strauss, it is Donauwald. It's okay. Next example is... Oh no, first I should tell you that there are not the same third in the orchestra and in the flute. The orchestra plays harmonical major third and the flute plays Pythagorean third, similar as Vienna Philharmonic Orchestra does normally when they play this beginning of the waltz. Next example, is it my composition? What is it? Is it from Johann Strauss? No. From me? Maybe. Next, the major third gets relatively low. Is it my composition? Is it a microtonal composition now? And now the minor third gets very big. It's maybe neutral third, nearly. Is it a microtonal composition now? Next examples. It's more easy to answer. What happened now? It's also a D, but very high on the end. On the last example, was it a microtonal composition? Was it a composition of mine? This is a copyright question. It's very important for microtonal composers in our time. Now, We can hear some next examples. Maybe we should think about what Aris Haber said. He said Abwandlungen in German, modifications of grammatical tones, microtonal modifications. And now we can hear another music, Alban Berg, violin concerto, and I try to find this is the score, piano score, and here's the music. Please listen. Second movement of violin concerto. It is only 6 bars, 201 to 206, and these are very interesting bars in some different modi to analyze. Martin Vogel wrote in his books about the music of Alban Berg, and he told that the orchestra musicians in Prague, profi musicians, said nobody could play this music in tune perfectly. But what means perfectly? Does it mean just intonation? Does it mean with natural third or Pythagorean third, with natural seventh? Or does it mean well-temperated? And Martin Vogel developed for these questions a new notation for the performance practice, maybe for Tristan chord of Wagner, fine-tuning intonation symbols. I used these symbols for writing my microtonal compositions later. So I come to one quintessence of my statements. I picked out these bars of Berg violin concerto because I like to show in what way the declaration of the musicians of Prague was appropriate. And it depends on a phenomenon that this structure of the violin concerto bars fulfills several different conditions of different musical styles at the same time. I have no, not this. Another example. Where can I find? Here. This is structure. Oh, let me go forwards. It's easier. We can see 3 different chords, bitonal chords. Here we have A major. And here we have E flat major, and they are crossed, bitonal, a structure with 2 central tones. And it's very completely, because here you have the next harmony and the next harmony. Here if you have traditional harmony system, we have first and fourth step and fifth step harmony, tonica, subdominante, dominante, and they are crossed entwined in B-tonal combination, and the impression is that it is maybe tonal music, but we are not really sure if we hear this. And so Alban Berg got big problems as 12-tone composer because of serial music. Many theoretical lectures said he gets out of 12-tone music here. And maybe it is true. Next phenomenon is this chord is an all-interval chord. Every interval, every chromatical interval is included in this combination of two tonalities. And if you have the combination of 3 steps of the harmony system, it uses every of the 12 tones, chromatical tones. This is the traditional thinking about these bars. But if you play the piece, then you have different questions. What should happen with the third interval? We have 2 third intervals, C sharp to A major, or we have a G sharp to E flat major, which also is the 7th interval to the A major. What about the intonation? What will the musicians do playing these bars? So we should hear the piece once more, these bars once more, and I analyzed the microintervallic structure, what the musicians of the orchestra and the soloist, what they did. The question is, which third interval do they use? Pythagorean third, or with 64 to 81 relation, or natural third, 64 to 80 means 4 to 5, or with well temperament, or with micro-interval frequencies 7, 9, neutral third, 9, 11. What will they do? And these options are used in different ways by different musicians and orchestras. I also used some theory of Doris Geller. She was writing about intonation. I try to find the next example here.
Sie hören den Leittonschritt HC in verschiedenen Größen. Er wird in das Tetrachord GAHC eingebaut und ist mit folgender Harmonik vorzustellen. Dieses Beispiel erklang in temperierter Stimmung. HC nun als pythagoreischer Halbtonschritt mit einem um 8 Cent erhöhten H. Jetzt bekommt HC eine Größe von 67 Cent. Dafür wird das H um 27 Cent erhöht und das A zum Ausgleich um 13 Cent. Und nun hören Sie HC als Vierteltonschritt. Das H ist um 50 Cent erhöht und das A um 25 Cent.
It's very important to know that Doris Geller here speaks about traditional diatonical music, not about 12-tone music, not about microtonal music. She is teaching for classical musicians. And she does not say, this is the best leading tone. She only tells us there are some different possibilities. How big should be the leading tone? Means how big should be the big third in the chord. Because we not only have a harmonical system here, we have a melodical system also. And the musicians have to fulfill both conditions. They have to be exactly with chords and they have to be exactly with melody. What do they do? It's a micro-intervallic intonation, and all pitches of this structure should be settled very clearly. And so the question appears if it is really possible to tune this chord, 6-tone chord, perfectly at all. For example, by trying to avoid adjusting listening, so that the listeners really hear what Allenberg meant, and so that the best degree of sonance is founding and of melody. I used an instrument for analyzing the micro-intervals which were played by these musicians. This is the mini muse or duplex built by Andrew Aaron Hunt in USA, and I can have here harmonical thirds and Pythagorean, and I have well-temperated pitches, and I have micro natural sevenths and so on, 11, 13, every interval is possible here. And when I heard these performances, I took 4 CDs with violin concerto of Allenberg. One is Gidon Kremer, and he's very well known and good violinist with Symphony Orchestra Bayerische Rundfunk, conductor Colin Davis. And now we look to this notation. With red pencil, for comparing, I noticed the microtone intervals which really were played. And this is a little bit horrible. I state more or less that Allenberg was a microtone composer who did not write exactly his microintervals. And this microtone structure fits well together to Franz Richter-Herf's notice that ecmelic chords sound better when they use more than 5 tones in the chord. Here we have 6 tones, and this is a microtonal structure, if you notice what really was played. I have noticed that 12-tone music and romantical expressionism and impressionism, maybe the whole music since Richard Wagner, can be microtone music, and normally sounds with micro intervals. But the notation is not micro-intervallic. So the performers decide which micro-interval, in which case they prefer. Which of the maybe 4 possible pitches, different pitches, in the frequency range of maybe B flat, they prefer. And this is useful with standard performances of classical and baroque music also. There we have different sizes of the major third and so on. Another example about these thirds, before I look back to Allenberg. Oh no, first we start with Berg. This is the first performance. I told you, Gidon Kremer. Please look to the red pencil, what I noticed about microintervals. Maybe you find I made an error. Here, for example, this C starts as well temperated, maybe Pythagorean C, but then during he plays it gets higher, 1 comma. And so please control what I did. I needed 3 days for analyzing this.
Thank you.
One phenomenon is this cadence A, D, and you see that the E is too low. So the fourth interval from E to A later is not exactly fourth interval. This was most surprising for me. I thought the orchestra would be strict in the intonation of this harmony, ground tones, but it is not. The next phenomenon is that the soloist normally plays what we call too high. You see here, and you see the other intervals. This E is very low, the A is very low, the G sharp is very, very low, and the E flat is very high. This could be an octave, but it is not. And so on. Then I looked to the half tones. 6 of the half tones of the soloist were too big, 5 were too small. No half tone was really a half tone. It's remembering me to what Doris Geller said about leading tones. We don't like exact leading tones in the melody, normally. But our ear hears the half tone, even if it is not played as half tone. Next phenomenon which I looked, I called it microprime. You have here A flat and another A flat. And you have G and another G. He changes the same tone. He doesn't play the identical tone. It is written identical tones, but it does not. But he is not a bad player, and not a bad conductor. What happens here? This was my question, since I heard the violin concerto when I was 14 years old. But I did not have the instruments, I did not have the ear training for finding out what I could find out now. That this is a completely microtonal structure in the performance. So I had the idea to find out what other performers will do. Would they play the same pitch or another? What will happen with another orchestra and another soloist? I have the next performance. Antje Whitehouse, Stavanger Symphonic Orchestra, dirigent Stephen Sloan. Now we could say they are not so well known, they are not so good, they will play it in a bad manner. Let us listen. In itself very exactly, and the soloist was very much too high. Here the soloist is not always too high, sometimes also too low, and the orchestra is in difference, comma difference. The musicians, the first phenomenon is this performance has not the same chamber tone. When we heard it I'm sure persons with absolute ear find out it faster than me. But then I changed it in the notation, so that we have the same notation for the A as we had here. And I noted every tone in relation to this A then, a second time. And so we can see the differences. Maybe the G sharp and the A flat here is nearly identical tone. We have a little bit vibrato. This soloist makes the half tone 3 times smaller and 2 times bigger. She has more normal half tones. Maybe it's better for our ears. And this microsecond phenomens you have here, not the same tone. And in the orchestra you have more different pitches instead of prim interval. The next performance, Pinchas Zuckermann, and he is really the most well known, and I hope it is the best interpretation. BBC Symphony and conductor Pierre Boulez. These are the best musicians for this work. And now look to the harmony system: A exactly, D exactly, E exactly. But what happens then? On the end, the orchestra gets high with the next E, A chord. What happens? Why do the musicians, they are able to hold the intonation, the chamber tone, but they don't do then. Why? Maybe it comes from the soloist, because he is very much higher. He is more higher than Gidon Kremer. He is really a star, and he plays so that the violin is the main melody. And this is possible by playing too high. As Alois Haber told, we get more sharp tones if they get microtone higher. This is a way of interpretation. He also changes the intonation of this C. It gets its first normal C and then gets higher also, as Gidon Kremer does. But then he has more identical tones. Here and here and here. He does not have this microprim. Only here. It changes. This phenomenon is very similar to Gidon Kremer, but if we look to the deviations, if you say deviations, we have sometimes the soloist 8th tone or 6th tone higher, and at the same time the orchestra quarter tone lower or 6th tone lower. So, 8th tone or 6th tone lower. So in the result, they have a difference of quarter tones. Is it a bad interpretation? What does our ear say? Adjusting, listening, we say, oh yes, it's okay. But here we have now really harmonical chords. We hear a cadence, we hear a harmony where it is not. Last example, this is Winfried Rademacher, Linus ensemble, and this is a version in arrangement of Arnold Schönberg without conductor. 2. And the middle voices, the E-flat harmony system, changes, sometimes too high, sometimes too low. And the soloist is changing, sometimes he is too low, sometimes too seldom, and more seldom too high, or a little bit high. And even although the piano is playing with this ensemble, the intonation is changing more than in traditional orchestras. This was a phenomenon I really don't understand how this could happen. What is similar in all of these 4 interpretations? Normally, the deviation of the soloist. It's not the same tone when the soloist plays. And so I can have only the question, do we really like this? And I can say what the musicians of Prague told. We cannot play it in exactly tuning. It's not possible. Maybe Alban did not want that we should play it in just intonation, maybe not the complete harmonies and melody system. Now I come back to Doris Keller, who said that the third interval is changing smaller and bigger. And here is an example from her book.
Der Dur-Sechstakkord in verschiedenen Stimmungsformen. Die Quinte ist rein und die Terz wird immer weiter erhöht. Zuerst die reine Terz, dann eine um 7 Cent erhöhte Form, dann die temperierte und zum Schluss die pythagoreische Terz. Das gleiche auch in Weiterlage.
Another example.
Sie hören das Tetrachord C-D-E-F, zuerst in linearer Intonation. Der Halbtonschritt EF ist auf 88 Cent verengt. Nun wird das E als reine Terz zu C gespielt und der Halbton EF verengt. Dadurch entsteht eine zu enge Quarte CF. Jetzt das Tetrachord mit E und F als reine Terz und Quarte zu C, also in vertikaler Intonation. Und nun die Folge C-D-E-F Fis G, zunächst in vertikaler Intonation. Dasselbe in linearer Intonation mit EF und Fis G als verengte Halbtonschritte.
This is for traditional music. And what happens then in this Berg? But why are we not incommoded when hearing a halftone which is 33% smaller than in the well-temperated system? Is this caused only by the phenomenon of adjusting listening? If so, does our ear hear deviating from, or prefer to hear deviating from well temperation, and likes microintervals in traditional music, and hears zu Recht by interpretation, or does our ear, if it hears microtone music, also have adjusting listening and makes an interpretation of the tone which is not played? Then we should speak about a misjusting listening or wrongly listening instead of adjusting listening. And from which phenomena is it dependent? Which of the 6 frequencies of Alban Berg, or which 6 possible C sharp, B flat, we would prefer? Maybe I finally bring one example about, pardon, 1 minute, yes. I bring only some shorts. We can here. The first chord, and I used Martin Vogel's method for finding out the degree of consonance. And noticed this chord of Berg in C major in different microtonal variations, and we can listen and see the notation. This Vogel's notation. Second one. This is musical progress. And then the social progress will follow. But first I have to make microtonal ear training.
Thank you very much, Professor Soyka. Minutes to make some questions, if you would like. Johannes. Okay. I also have a question. I mean, I'm sure Johannes will make a question. Because, for example, in the sequence of Zuckerman, because for me it's great to speak right now to a very good specialist, and you have given us a lot of information, but I'm missing a little bit of more your opinion. Your very personal opinion. Why do you think that Zuckerman, for example, he keeps the same frequency sometimes, and sometimes he changes? I mean, probably the whole has to do, probably his education backgrounds, his personal performing habits, or there's something more that we don't know but you have an opinion about?
I can tell now in short way, only 2 answers. One is the soloist is not loud enough, normally, against the orchestra. So he has to play higher. And especially in Richard Wagner's operas. The singers normally are not loud enough, and so they have much vibrato or too low, too high against the orchestra. This is a big problem for listeners with Wagner operas and with understanding Wagner's harmony. Because if the tune is not identical, how should we understand what Wagner meant with the chord? The other phenomenon, especially with Zuckermann, here is very, very interesting. You see here, he always was too high for the orchestra. And here the orchestra reacts and gets higher. And what does Zuckermann? He gets lower now. And so the intonation on the end will be right. It's very, very interesting. It's a psychological reaction of Zuckermann.
There was some psychological, some alive.
They are a team.
Rounding, exactly.
And they do what the others do, and their ears are reacting very fast. And I'm sure he felt that they get too high now also. And what does he do now?
Yes. Please.
I forget the author's name, but I read an article about violinists' intonation at the end of a note with large intervals and how it changes. And I'd like to ask, when you checked the violinists, were you looking at the beginning or where did they settle into a tuning for each note? Yes, sorry, I wasn't very clear.
Yes, he wrote, er hat einen Artikel von jemandem gelesen, der kann sich nicht bringen. Du sprichst Deutsch, oder?
Ja, ein bisschen, okay. Also, ich habe einen Artikel gelesen und die Autorin hat gesagt, dass Geige spielen machen anders am Ende den Noten.
Oh.
Und haben Sie einen Durchschnitt für Intonation gemacht oder die Anfänge?
I like to give the answer with an example of Doris Geller. She and me also, with the microtonal organ, found out that we don't only listen intervals by harmonizing, also there are at the start of intervals the tones are not as harmonical as in the later phase of the chord or the interval. And she did it with piano also, with natural tones. We know this phenomenon, Einschwingvorgang. What is the word for Einschwingvorgang? At the start of the sound with overtones, they are not harmonical. It needs a little bit time for getting harmonical. And the same phenomenon is used by the organ of Martin Vogel. He does not the half-tone pipe to the half-tone pipe, one aside the other. He puts the fifth interval to the pipe and the third interval, and the natural seven. They are neighbors. And when you play harmonical chords, Vogel liked a perfect intonation without waves. And this is the result then. You hear short, it's not exactly, and then it gets exactly. But there is another phenomenon also, and we have it on the piano.
Sie hören eine Folge von 9 Akkorden, bei denen als Oberstimme das eingestrichene E erklingt.
All with the same.
Achten Sie darauf, wie das E seine Wirkung verändert, wenn der Akkord wechselt.
The highest tone seems to change. Higher.
Nun die gleiche Akkordfolge noch einmal, nur fehlt jetzt in der Oberstimme das E, sodass Sie es selbst dazu singen oder spielen können und dabei auch unterschiedliche Arten der Intonation ausprobieren können.
Okay, I should start this, guys. If you hear this with earphone and sing And later you try to hear what you were singing. You find out you don't sing the same tone.
Thank you very much. And,
Hi, good morning.
Moin.
Thank you. My name is Todd Harrop. I'm from Canada, and today is Canada Day, so happy Canada Day to my compatriot who's also here. And I am now living in Germany, studying for a PhD in Hamburg at the Hochschule für Musik und Theater. ZM4 stands for Center for Microtonal Music and Multimedia. This is a department within our school headed by Georg Haidu, who is my advisor, and my secondary advisor is Manfred Stanke, who, if you don't know him, he studied with Ben Johnston, for example, whose name came up yesterday, who did not study with Harry Parch officially because Harry Parch did not want official students. Anyway, enough about that. Alternative flattened dimensions in harmonic space. I chose a cheeky title that sounds pseudo-scientific. All this means is, in our case, not using the octave as an interval of equivalency. That is for motivic transposition, or when you hear a note and then you play it an octave higher, you think it's the same note, but higher. This is called chroma. However, I'm interested in music that can play with other intervals instead of the pure octave. So I will go through some examples from myself and friends of mine. First of all, maybe a little review. We can look at the normal chromatic scale, 12 notes within an octave. So this is my short form here, 12 per octave. IOE stands for interval of equivalency. And 2/1, I think we all know, is the octave. That's the frequency ratio. If I have 100 hertz and I play 200 hertz, it sounds 1 octave higher. So here's an example of a lattice. Good, figures are not too small. In the center is 1/1, which is the unison, and these are frequency ratios. Again, if I multiply some frequency by these fractions, then I will get intervals which we would recognize as being the chromatic scale. However, this is the just version, not the equal-tempered version. And I don't need to play an example. I'm sure you already know this. And it would not be... I should not leave it yet until I ask if you notice that my axes are wonky. That is, they are not perfectly straight. And so what do the axes mean, and why are they bent? The horizontal axis represents perfect fifths. So again, if I start at the center, 1/1, and go to the right, that's a 3/2, which is a perfect fifth. And after that, 9/8 is a major second. Because 2 perfect fifths takes us beyond the octave, and then we bring it back down into our first octave. That is, we transpose it down 1 octave. The vertical axis, or this diagonal axis, represents the prime number 5. So if you look going upward, 5/4 is just major third. Going down would be a just major third downward, otherwise a minor sixth by inversion. So why are the axes not straight? Well, here I've extruded another dimension, and that is the dimension that represents octaves, 2. So now it's going on another angle, and the ratios that are in red represent the, let's say, the pure or original ratios before they are transposed down or upward into our scale. For example, what can we do? Well, we could go straight up, and we have 5/1, this is the fifth harmonic, so an overtone relationship. Remember we had O-tonal and U-tonal ratios yesterday when looking at Harry Partch's music. And here 5/1 needs to come down 2 octaves, and I drew this dotted line with an arrow which is pointing to 5/4, which is what we recognize as the major third in our normal scale. But here you can see where each of those ratios actually came from. The exception is 5/3, which is a major sixth, and that's in the top left corner. Both of those numbers are odd numbers. And it fits within the octave. There's no reason to adjust it any further. So there is no corresponding red ratio for 5/3. Well, this is a microtonal conference, so we should discuss microtonal music. Here is a title card for a 19-tone scale. Yes, 19 notes per octave, and the example that I will show is using 4/1 as interval of equivalency, and this is 2 octaves. So although it's 19 notes in 1 octave, if you just double that, it's 38 notes in a double octave. And Stephen Altoft arrived yesterday, and he had asked a piece from me, and so I did write a trumpet piece in a couple modes using this kind of tuning. He has a 19-tone trumpet, by the way, which you will hear about later, and actually get to hear in concert this weekend. So here's an example of a mode from the piece that I wrote for Stephen. He won't play it, but I can play for you an excerpt. So my piece is in 5 short movements. The first, middle, and last movement use this mode, which you can see is alternating step sizes. I don't use all 19 or 38 chromatic notes in the scale. Instead, I choose 11 by using this interval pattern of 3 steps, 4 steps, 3 steps, 4 steps, and so on. It's a symmetrical scale. The first note here is a middle C, and the last one is C 2 octaves above. But if you work inwards, you'll see the pattern repeats 3, 4, 3, 4, 3, 4. Maybe I have an example here. Yeah, so here's page 1 of the score. This is now, I experimented a little with Sims notation, which I think is also used in the Ecumenische Society. I'm not actually familiar with it, but we have a notation program from our advisor, Georg Haidu, where you can very easily switch between notation styles. So just for this example, I tried to use Sims notation. If you understand it, that's great. I think some notation symbols are a little overlapped, so we can modify that. However, in this example, I used a notation that Stephen had asked for, and this is published, the notation is published on his website as a resource for composers who wish to write for him. I'm sure he'll talk about that. But basically, enharmonics are important. They are distinct. If you see a G sharp and an A flat, they would sound 63 cents apart. However, in this excerpt you won't, because I don't have such chromatic notes. This is with the 3-4-3-4 mode. Well, hopefully this will play. two movements use a similar approach. Instead of 3-4, 3-4, etc., it's 3-2, 3-2. And this gives me 15 notes, again symmetrical. Okay, we have 19 notes per octave, or 38 per double octave. Now we're going to change that interval of equivalency. Instead of being an octave or a compound octave, I'm going to take the 12th. And this is harmonic 3/1. Now this is a very special scale. Oh, wait a minute. 19 per 12. Oh, sorry. Back up. That comes later. Now I've gone back to the chromatic scale, but extended the semitones to the perfect 12th. That's what this means. 19 per perfect 12th, interval of 3/1. And here's a lattice. So this lattice is familiar and yet different. And we're kind of, I know it looks like a diamond or a wing shape of this double diamond, but imagine we're looking down on this plane. And you will see some familiar intervals like 3/2, 5/4, your fifth and major third, 6/5 minor third, but you will also see octave versions of some of those. For example, 5/2, which is the major 10th, instead of only 5/4. You will also see 8/3 instead of only 4/3. So that's the perfect 11th, as well as the perfect 4th, and as well the octave itself is contained within this scale. It's just a chromatic run up to the 12th. My axes here, to the left representing prime 2, to the right representing prime 5. But now prime 3 has been flattened. It's missing. Remember at the beginning I had 5 and 3, and then I brought out 2, because 2 is normally hidden. Now 3 is hidden. Now we come to a very special scale where we specialize in Hamburg, and this is how I got reintroduced to microtonality from Canada with friends there and further colleagues in Boston. We're very interested in 13 notes per 12th or third harmonic, and this has a special name, the Bohlen-Pierce scale, discovered by 3 people around the same time: Heinz Bohlen, Kees van Pruyen, and John Pierce. Between 1972 and 1984, publications came out. They were not working together, but they discovered properties of this scale within that period and published articles, not knowing that the other 2 had also published articles. Anyway, now we're all friends, and we can represent this scale as well on a lattice. Imagine a vertical plane and we're looking straight on. I have in blue the numbers 5 and 7, so here's another prime number, 7. And what is missing? 2 and 3. The Bohlen-Pierce scale does not use 2. And I find this is radical, because when we speak about microtonality or just intonation, we tend to use language like 7 limit, 11 limit with Harry Parch, 13 limit, and this assumes that all the prime numbers up to that limit are used, meaning 2 is at the beginning, 2 is the octave. It is often assumed to be the interval of equivalency. But here, you just take 2, 3, 5 and, well, raise it another level to 3, 5, 7. And then you can play in this Bohlen-Pierce harmonic world. So, once more, 3 is flattened. You won't see it here. It's not it is implied. For example, let's go to the right, downward right. We have a 5/3. And we know this interval already is the major 6th. However, I would normally, or let's say the implied original ratio is 5/1, and now I've brought it down, say the undertone, by prime 3. hence 5 over 3. Remember, in our normal scale, 5 over 1 becomes 5 over 4, the major third, but here, 5 over 1 becomes 5 over 3, which sounds like a major sixth, but in BP parlance, I think we just say BP sixth. Yeah. Going up, same process, 7 over 3. So instead of 7 over 1, reducing it to 7 over 4, here we reduce it by 3, so it becomes 7 over 3, which sounds like a septimal minor third. I made these lattices in this kind of configuration so that we can get interesting and put them together. So now we have both a chromatic conventional scale extended to the perfect 12 on the horizontal plane, and now this bowl and pierce scale on the vertical plane. Here they intersect. Of course, at the unison, if they share the same starting note, they will have a unison in common. And then going along this 5 axis, because they have the prime number 5 in common, they each have this major sixth, 5 over 3. Going the other direction, 9 over 5, that's a standard bowl and pierce interval, and it's an optional minor seventh in the just chromatic scale. So yeah, I chose that minor seventh in order to have a common tone between two scales. So that, for example, when I want to compose for a normal B-flat clarinet and a bowl and pierce clarinet, then perhaps I can use this model in order to find intervals or chords in between both scales. Here's an example with the pink triangles. If you look at the back one to the left, we have the ratios 6 over 5, 7 over 5, 9 over 5. And if you take out the 5s, then what you have is a 6, 7, 9 triad, which is a septimal flavored minor triad. That triad is not possible in either of the scales. It can only happen between the two scales. And I'm interested in this as a composer, in this possibility with other scales. There is another possibility. I haven't made one because I do these by hand. It takes some time. But the other vertical plane, which would be 2, 7, prime numbers 2 and 7, works out nicely to a 22-tone per octave scale, and whatever that would be extended to the 12th. So maybe that's another possibility. Composers who have mixed both scales include Friedrich Schwenk and Sascha Lemke in Hamburg, and Roger Feria in Montreal. So a few years ago we had a conference, and these three people wrote music for these two kinds of clarinets. I hope to play an example from Roger Feria. Example, there are no dyads that are found in either scale. This is only possible between these two kinds of clarinets. How much time do I have, Iverson?
We will take 5 minutes. Yeah, like
10
minutes.
10 minutes. Okay, thank you.
No, sorry, 15 minutes.
Even better, thanks. Then just quickly here, I measured for an analysis in a book that's coming out. I measured in cents and hects, which is a measurement unit by Heinz Bohlen. It's simply 100 hects per Bohlen-Pierce step. Oh, by the way, a Bohlen-Pierce step is 146.3 cents, the equal tempered version. So it's larger than normal, or larger than a microtonal step. And sometimes it can be useful to simply divide that kind of step, or any step, into 100 units, and then you can measure variance. It was very confusing, hard work for me to analyze these pieces, which were written in many different notation formats. And I think we'll hear more about Bohlen-Pierce notation tomorrow. So I want to move on. I wrote a piece for the Bohlen-Pierce clarinet. I wrote a few, but the one I want to show now combines another scale with the Bohlen-Pierce scale, and that's known as the Carlos Alpha scale. It was published in 1986 by Wendy Carlos. She was looking for a way to have pure major triads, and she found that by getting rid of the octave and octave inversions, she could get very, very pure major triads and minor triads. For example, by dividing the perfect fifth into 9 or 11 or 20 steps. Nora Louise Müller and I discovered that Carlos Alpha and Bohlen-Pierce share an interval in common, which is very close to the octave. It's 1170 cents. So that's almost a sixth tone flat of an octave. So this is just coincidence that the two scales line up. Here's an example of most of the Bohlen-Pierce scale. Remember I said that it repeats, or it continues to the third harmonic or perfect 12th. Well, for this composition project, I wanted to use this flat octave as an octave, and to do my inversions at this funny interval. As I said, Carlos Alpha, which is the second staff, has the same interval, 1170, but it has smaller steps. So Bohlen-Pierce has 146 cents per semitone. Carlos Alpha has 78 cents per semitone. It's almost like a quarter tone scale in relation to the BP scale. That is 2 steps for every 1 BP. The boxes in red indicate common tones that I decided were close enough for transposition, for pivoting around, to modulate from one section of the piece to another. And here this is just normal notation with sense deviation on top. You can see it's quite a mess. It's very difficult to notate, to compose and keep these things in my head. So there are strategies for composers if you're interested. Nora, Louisa, and I could talk to you about that. So here's an example of page 1. The orange circle at the top is Bohlen-Pierce, and then near the bottom, Carlos Alpha. I'll raise my hand when we change there. Listen for common tones at that point, the bar before and the bar after. I also will zoom in and we can look more closely because I know this is very small, just to give you the general shape. And then this blue arrow, which is pointing back to the beginning, shows a transposition of the opening bars downward by the flat octave, or the short octave. What I've noticed is that the very first instant sounds out of tune, but then the rest of the notes are perfectly in tune, and somehow my mind retroactively adjusts and says, oh no, everything's fine. I think melodically this short octave works. Harmonically, I think we would hear quite a nasty interval. So, let's see. This is the one that's not working. I skipped ahead, sorry. I wanted to show you the zoomed in version, but then we missed the transition. I'll just play again. This transition is more easy to see when it's bigger and color-coded. So the green represents the top of or near the top of the Bohlen-Pierce scale and top of the Carlos Alpha scale. They're very close. Purple and purple coincide as do red and red. Oh, the bottom staff maybe is the one you want to read. It's the sounding result. The middle one is for my work with a MIDI keyboard, and the top one is for the performer who has a special notation that is logical for fingering on the clarinet. So, many staves. So we're into the last section. Good. Future work. We met John Chowning last summer in Hamburg. He came to the Sound and Music Computing Conference, and some old repertoire was played, and new repertoire, and many discussions and panel discussions. And his piece from 1977 called Stria is it's for tape. It was supposed to be for a live computer, which is possible now, but it was not in 1977. However, it's a piece that's a kind of a groundbreaker in many aspects. FM synthesis, reverb, panning, and this idea of using the golden ratio, which is pervasive in many, many aspects of the piece, including as interval of equivalency. So, what is the golden ratio? As a musical interval, it sounds like a minor sixth, which is a sixth tone sharp, so 833 cents. As you know, the golden ratio is related to the Fibonacci series, 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, 21, and so on. If you take two of those ratios after the first few, they are ideal as just intonation ratios for a minor sixth. So he chose 9 steps per golden ratio, which coincidentally is almost virtually the same as a 13 note per octave scale. Maybe a different tuning, but it reaches all the same temperaments as 13 tones per octave. I asked him if this was intentional as a kind of symbolic way of saying no to the normal chromatic scale by taking something slightly smaller, but he said no, it was coincidental. It had more to do with 9 divisions of the golden ratio matching the timbres in FM synthesis, which would also use parameters governed by the golden ratio. It gets complicated. But he did try 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and 13 steps. So again, taking a range from the Fibonacci series. Like I said, the piece has so much to do with the golden ratio. This is a very general picture of the overall form in frequency range from high to low, up again, lower, and then high. I think this was done by Kevin Dahan. My notes are not showing on my computer, so I'm just pulling on memory. But this appeared in the Computer Music Journal of 2007. It was a 30th year anniversary of Stria, which was, I think, commissioned by IRCAM, or at least built there and then documented there. 5 minutes, perfect. This is a score transcription by Toby Mountain. It's unpublished, and it's from 1981 or 83, drawn by hand. So an enormous amount of work. I can't believe it. I think either going through Chowning's notes or only listening to a tape version. What I would like to do is, this is future work, is approach the score from a just intonation perspective by treating the golden ratio as a prime number and using that to find pseudo-overtone relationships, pseudo-triads, using this golden ratio 1.618 as if it were an integer. Just to remind you of what this piece sounds like, here's a reconstruction. So it's brighter than what you would find on YouTube, for example, which comes from an old record. Instead of playing the whole 2.5 minutes, so I can wrap up. The data is available from that Computer Music Journal as a giant spreadsheet or lists of data, because it was all done as a computer program. And Kevin Dahan and someone else reconstructed. I think they did their own versions. Using either Ruby or C-Sound. I think this was a C-Sound version with modern computing power. So it's very bright, it's very lovely to hear, and it's in 4-channel. If you ever get a chance to hear it live, you must. I've downmixed it this morning for stereo. But I mentioned using phi as if it were a prime number, so this is the very beginning of some work in that. Another lattice, simply 9 notes that are contained within this minor sixth, instead of 13 notes within an octave, which would look different. It's very simple. All I need are primes 2 and 5 to represent every note almost perfectly. Stria includes a quarter-tone version, so not just 19, but 18. From time to time it breaks into this finer scale, which would require a more complicated lattice. It's in 3 dimensions, but I'm still working on this one. By the way, the program I use saves to PDF in a way that allows Adobe Reader to rotate these models, and sometimes that helps. If you're interested in that, it's a little tip that I would like to share with you at the very end. So, I have nothing more to say about that, just look how complicated it is. Future work. Thank you very much.
We have a couple of minutes. If anyone has any questions, please. Jaime,
how do you implement your models into electronics?
From these harmonic models and then into my work as a creative composer? Let's see, what's an example? Well, one example which I did not show was for another clarinet, which repeats a scale at the perfect 12th. but she did this by removing part of the clarinet body, putting the mouthpiece on the lower part, and this gave 9 tones per 12th, but in an uneven way. And so to deal with that, I used, in the first movement, a generative grammar, and so a kind of syntax or a way of saying notes that follow each other, I like them to sound this way or to go together in this way, as a kind of language, building a musical language. And harmonically, at the same time, was a normal flute, which played usually pleasant, just intervals on top, or sometimes below the clarinet. And again, this was taken from a kind of model that I did of all the possible ratios that might exist within that clarinet, as well as with a 12-tone scale on top. That's one example. Would you like another one? No. I'll think of another one. In the meantime, is there another question? Yes.
Thank you so much. Great presentation, interesting music.
Thank you.
My question is firstly about the volunteer scale, but it can be kind of asked about Oswald scale, Carlo scale, and John Champlin scale. So volunteer scale obviously works there on clarinet because of the harmonics.
That's right.
And I know for the fact that you mentioned Mozarteum, that the experiments on his viola, the string instrument with the correct fingering and tuning, it's easy to kind of replicate the scale for the other ones. But speaking of the other instruments, I'm just asking, I don't have any information, but I would like you to give us information about other instruments. How would it be, on which instruments would it be possible to implement volunteers or the other two scales, or as a neo the kind of different sorts of reconciliation of 2 of these scales, 3 of these scales, speaking of the other instruments?
Mm-hmm. We've experimented with various instruments playing bowl and pierce here in Germany. In Hamburg, as well as in my hometown, or thereabouts with Canadian musicians, acoustic instruments. So, for example, contrabass, cello. You mentioned Manfred Stanke with his viola. What else? In Canada, we have 2 singers learn the scale, and then there's Elaine Walker. She also has a new wave pop background, but she's also one of our bowl and pierce researchers, and sings in this scale. Actually, there's a violinist in her band who has learned the scale. They all sound fine as long as they're in tune. But for the singers, it's been more difficult. That they need a lot of reference work, say on a keyboard, standing by in rehearsal, that has been tuned to bowl and pierce, because it's not a natural thing. And we have experience with teaching people sight singing, music sight singing and dictation, bowl and pierce, which had some progress. Recorder is very good for BP. It's possible to plug holes and drill certain other holes, because you can overblow, I think gently. I'm not a wind player, but you can imitate the flat octave by overblowing weakly on the recorder. I think I'm guessing, but Noha, you can correct me.
You would use different fingerings again.
Okay, different
If you
fingerings.
overload too soft, it would change the sound.
Just like that. Yeah. The recorder has a nice timbre for that, organ, of course.
Is there in the meantime other volunteers instruments built?
A couple of guitars. The recorder is easy. Anyone can do that at home with the pattern. We have a lower clarinet. In our possession. What else, Noha? Other instruments? Oh, of course, in Canada I played chimes. So again, any mallet instruments are easy to make. Chimes you can cut to length. And we have a bowl and pierce marimba and glockenspiel and tubular bells. Again, these different materials that are cut to the right length. There's a few things up there.
Hello, very nice to be here with you. I'm going to tell you what I'm going to do. So first, I'll tell you a bit about what I do so that you have an idea on the background of my work in general, and you probably will understand better why I'm talking about these subjects. I'm talking about Emmanuel Nunes, make an introduction to his music, how he works with microtonality, or how he did work, and how he would relate microtonal thoughts into his music with other parameters, and then very briefly I'll talk about my own music. So feel free to laugh now. This is me when I used to work with Emmanuel Nunes, and I would always attend the Stockhausen courses for many years. So I'm a composer. This is sort of what I meant to say. I have, like all of us, I'll skip these slides just to give you an idea. I also organize a festival. It's itinerant, so please, I take these short seconds just for you to tell me, if you're interested in coming. We are very pleased to have you here. Here it was in the Philippines, where we like to go. It's a nice place. The first time was in Poland in 2003. It was in Brazil 4 times. We have our own ensemble. We have an artist's residency. We do protocols with other institutions. And mainly we also have this in the mountains. We do a festival integrated in an aviation festival, festival for airplanes. And we have had distinguished guests among us who are here and who will perform. And I'm very happy. And I'll be very happy if you have any idea that you want to come. It's really my pleasure. Besides this, I also teach in the Superior School of Applied Arts in Castelo Branco in Portugal, composition and other subjects, and I research in the Institute of Ethnomusicology of the New University of Lisbon. So I would be very happy, if you have any idea on some sort of protocol, I'll be delighted to receive it, because I have been delighted in my mind, and I'll be for the rest of this. It's so rich, it's really marvelous. So, talking about Emmanuel Nunes, this idea of counterpoint of parameters and his idea on micro. So first I have to tell you a bit, how many of you know this composer? Okay, only a few. For us in Portugal, he's a reference, but actually it's weird, he's less known in a way in Portugal than in Paris and in Germany, particularly in Cologne, where he also lived. So he was born in 1940, he passed away some years ago. I worked with him the last 10 years, more or less, of his life, and I was a private student in Paris, and he was my PhD co-advisor. And he basically lived outside Portugal since 1964. He lived in Paris and in Cologne. In Cologne he studied with Stockhausen and Harrop, also not in Cologne, but he did this. Luciano Berri, these were his main professors. And then he finished kind of his career more or less in Paris. So he was a professor in the Paris Conservatoire for more than 10 years. And he would work in IRCAM all the time. So this is important, I think, for you to understand how he would work, because we know more or less, I think, these institutions, and so how he could actually implement his ideas, because we have, I don't know about you, I have many ideas, but then to implement them, that's not so easy. So he has a very extensive catalog, which is here divided in this recent book. As his youth works and these cycles. I'll speak a little bit about a few of the cycles, just for you to have an idea. So his first works are part of this first cycle that would only use 4 pitches, not microtone. And it's here. It was used in a movie by a famous Cannes film director, Portuguese, but who always worked in France. spectra, his use, although it was not spectral at all. We had this conversation specifically. So the cycle went on, and he's probably the most famous cycle is the creation cycle. The creation cycle, as I'll be able to tell you, and I'll start now with this idea of counterpoint of parameters on how he would relate his music ideas within each other. And so he worked on it since 77, and the first piece is Nachtmusik 1, and they are based on basically this rhythmic principle of having two proportions at the same time. You know that one would start, and then you have the proportion, and they would restart rhythmically. And then, he would, for example, this 7 against 5, he would have traditional notation, and then he would note the proportions and symmetries and so forth. And being here, I'm sure I can easily get an answer that probably you might be already thinking that 7 against 5, it is the rhythmic structure, but what else do you think it is?
Would you just repeat the question?
How would you relate pulses of 7 against 5? Would you relate this to anything else rather than rhythm?
Frequency.
Say again?
Frequency ratios.
Which is, more or less?
This is right.
There you go. And of course they are, okay? This has to do with these ideas that also you find very much in Stockhausen music, that you might know from accelerating and decelerating things, and it's from Contact on and so many other works. So these works, I'm sorry to speak on top of the music, it's because I prefer to show you more things so that you can then search, but then I know that you cannot listen to everything properly. But these are not microtonal thoughts, and even the proportions sometimes that he uses, now I know, different proportions from the intervals in terms of tuning, let's say. But the main idea is this connection between rhythm and frequency. So here in Lichtung, it's there are Lichtung pieces, and from this cycle, and this idea of having several proportions and these rhythmic pairs, they are applied to many things. So not just the connection between frequency ratios and durations and finding the proportions within the durations, but also applied to spatialization, real-time spatialization of the instruments. This was all made in Mirkan. It was his house for many years. And we have here the 13 loudspeakers in this special system that gives this. And here you find, and I'll speak a little bit more about it, you find the use of microtonality in a peculiar way. Particularly in the process sound, which are simple things like pitch shift, harmonizers, and so on, but you'll find it there, and I will explain further on a bit of his ideas on this. So Nunes is well known for his not really tiny pieces in terms of lengths of resources. One of these works is Quadlibet, just to give you an idea. Orchestras, spatialized, and so on. So, and it's funny, he would say that it seems a paradox. It's one of the works that was more performed. I mean, for the dimension of it, right? I mean, except the solo pieces and so on. although it requires a huge amount of resources. Same thing for musicals, you have here the score for it. So, these pretty large works. One of the large works that first he started to use microtonality in his work for choir and ensemble. He started to experiment with instruments that are tuned in different ways. But I mean, not like the ligeti things, just a part and other. A bit more complex, as you will see in other works further on. So the last years of his life, he was working on projects with Sim. So I don't want to say opera because it was an opera, and this more than an opera, kind of a special musical theater, and this other work that he hasn't finished. He passed away before, Peter King. So one of the works is the work that we'll see a bit more about it. And so there is the Das Märchen, La Douce, and Peter King. Das Märchen is a 4-hour opera that was at the moment only performed in Portugal. It was a huge scandal politically. The Ministry of Culture fell down. It was kind of an important thing, an important event for the good and the bad reasons. La Douce was then performed in Casa de Música, Porto. I don't know if you know this place. It's a wonderful hall in Porto. And then it was just made in Berlin, just recently. I was there a few months ago to see it. And for the reasons that you will see, I was surprised to say that although, the musicians were nice and so on, there was a tricky detail that actually for me ruined the work, which is the work is, as I'll explain, it's for actors that speak both in French and in German, because this were the places where he used to live. And the microtonal parts, in a way, derive from his readings on text. But in Berlin, you had the whole text of the actors in German. It was a requirement from the opera, you see. So you had all these melodic lines that derive from this, I'll explain from this micro intonation details. And then you just have the German, which of course it's different. So it's what it is. So this is La Douce. La Douce, 2 actors, soprano, countertenor, chamber ensemble, and live electronics, with a libretto from Dostoevsky. And from here, like in the opera, you have many works that derive from it. Here, you have 3 main works, which are all important, I think, which you may find interesting. And so, Improvisation 2, Portrait, for ein monodrame, and the electricity of the human thoughts for string quartet. And the new thing here, in a way, is it's a bit tricky to play. So this is Improvisation 2, Portrait for altos, so for viola, and the strings are tuned. So the second string 1/4 tone lower, and the third 1/3 tone higher, and the fourth 1/3 lower, which, as you may imagine, has it's not easy to play. I'll play an excerpt from this recording by Christophe Desjardins, who was delighted, actually, by the way, about this event. He's a professor of the Paris Conservatory, and he was delighted. So I think maybe we'll talk one of these days with him. And Christophe, because we have spoken at the time, and also Emmanuel, he had to study very hard the positions, and then to retune his ear to the new tuning, because for Emmanuel, this was an idea of like a new temperament, like he would say. He would say that if I have Christoph studying without the detuning, for me it sounds detuned, because it changes all his temperament. You'll see, for him it sounded not as something out of our different equal temperament, but has a special temperament and so on. So I'll give you an example. Emmanuel, a 20-minute piece, more or less, so it wouldn't take us a bit of time. I don't know, we'll discuss further on what you're listening to, but I think his idea of this temperament works as he thought. So also, we're going to listen, but improvisation type, it's the same thing, but with a whole string quartet and with different tunings too, so that you have here in color for the first violin, second violin, viola and cello, and how do you work? And as you can imagine, it is not easy to perform, but this is not new for any of us, I guess. So, derived from Ladus. In the latest piece that I'm going to present, Improvisation 1, it is, we have the same thing, but with the whole ensemble, with these different tunings. And I'll explain you a bit about some of his ideas on how, his thoughts on how he got to this. So he was interested in microtonalities, but not really for him, like he would say, not really, so much ornamentic, like melodically, for example. This is the kind of thing that for him would not work. So here, for example, in this piece and in others that I told you, he would just tune the musicians in a different way. That was his kind of idea of creating this kind of new temperament to his and to their ears too. For example, in the previous work that I've shown you, Lichtung, there are many transpositions in electronics from 20, 40 hertz to generate changes in timbre also, creating what he called this kind of small stain in the notes, to make it either more or less perceptible in these things. By the way, I'll tell you a story that he was a professor in Paris Conservatory, and they have, and I don't know at the moment actually, but they used to have the Vischengradsky piano, and that it's like as a minor sixth, right, in the keyboard, let's say. That's, as far as I know, it's the semitone. And so there was this Frenchman who just go there, just return, and Emmanuel would spend a lot of time just experimenting in it. And they wanted to take it down. They wanted to replace it by an electronic piano. So Emmanuel is well known for scandals. So he made a huge letter and he said, "No way, while I'm still a professor, that you'll take this piano." So it was true for those years, at least it stayed. Now I don't know. Something that we should, I think, make an effort to maintain these things. So he was aware of experimenting with solo. You know solo? This EFCAM software. If you don't know, just it's fine. It's just for speech analysis. Derivations for MXNSP to make speech analysis and this kind of studies, and intonation studies to see these micro small differences. Although he was not using solo, he was using his own ear for his music, and sometimes he would have this idea of having one note, which was not one note, of course, with these micro-intervallic things. And this microtonal aspects, like he says, of speech is something that has always interested me. I have decided that when I would grab it, it would be for real. So this is something that was in his mind for many years. And then when he did it, and he did in a smash 4 hours in La Douce and in different ways. Indeed, it's a work that would take us many months to analyze properly, or minimally properly. So he says, in terms of pitch, there are transmutations of images from one domain into the other. This is again the counterpoint of parameters, these relationships that we had, for example, in the creation cycle with rhythm and these other things that I'll still show some examples of these things. And this transmutation is also occurring in the rhythm. So, Improvisation was fully premiered here. And this is the recording that you're... So again, part of La Douce, and with these different tunings in the instruments too. For Nunes, this idea of micro was connected, or he would think a lot about the idea of microtemporality, which he would relate in many different ways with microtonality. So he would say this micro duration, so up to 10 microseconds, can be determined, he says, for the success of the pretended results. He says that microtemporality is bound to the priorities of the musical dimension for the ensemble of sound editing manipulations, and such priorities are determined by the characteristics of one's musical style. That these events can be found in microtemporality escape our analytical listening in general, but they are essential both for our grasp of the durational, rhythmical time relationships and the overall form of the evolution form. So this is to say, sometimes when we have these micro changes, even if we don't realize specifically what is going on in the overall shape, we are, for example, able to relate one part with the other to keep it in a simple way. So this is an interpretative dimension of my own compositional attitude. I realized that in what I call a counterpoint of parameters, and what he says, a certain autonomy of the evolution of one parameter in relation to others. there exists not so obvious but fundamental concept of counterpoint in the time dimension, which implies a multitude of floating relationships. So, getting back easily to the rhythmical pairs that we were seeing. So you'll see, I mean, this is an article, a famous article that you'll also find in German. I just translated here a bit into English. And so again, the 7, 2, 5. Do you understand the second example there? That says 5, 2, 3, 4, 1? Or I can explain very easily. I mean, it's just, so if you multiply 7 times 5, it is, just for your attention, I know you know math. Thank you. And so if we put this into steps, right, if we go from 5 to 5, we'll have the 7. If we go from 7 to 7, we'll have the 5. You see, like 7 against 5. So first you'll have the 5, like the first thing that you'll listen to, and then you'll have 2 more, which will be the 7, right? And then the second thing is 3 more, which is the 10, so the second bit of 7. Okay, let me put it this musically very easily, which is just 3 against 2, which we write in one tempo, right? And then we have the relations between it. Of course, then he has many aspects. He works for decades. How he works, what he calls he calls about how types of symmetry and so forth. This kind of readings, cycles that are superimposed with different values, because of course you can write, getting back to the 3 and 2, or you can write, right, and then you can superimpose these cycles, and they will at certain points be again together and so forth. So this is one of the rhythms. Then, horizontal relocation, so putting these faster ones and short ones just differently, and not random, of course, not arbitrarily, but to make, for example, coincidences in the axis, because of course, tan, and tan, it's symmetrical, right? So you have an axis, and then of course when it's more complex, you have many different kind of axes. And then the third reading where he isolates some of these moments, to take material, let's put it in a very simple way. And he indeed selects 23 pairs, and he puts there 14, and then 9 that he uses. That's 7 against 5, 6 against 5, 5 against 4, 5 against 3, which I don't have to explain here, of course. And they are absolutely together. These things from time and interval and so forth, and also space, in time and so forth, and many other parameters. So we're not doing the game of guessing what's what and how this works, because I think you know. But I'll give you a short example, which you have already guessed, actually. Here in many ways. I just put it, the pair more like explicit. This is typically Nunes, and for sure in Stockhausen too, right? It's very complicated, but then sometimes it's just this is the thing, and then it goes back and so forth. So here you have, of course, the tritone and the 7 against 5, which I think it's very easy to understand here. And of course, not of course, but maybe you have noticed that there are many time differences. So they have to be studied basically step by step and memorized. That's how he integrates the thing. And in a way, he had some fights because they were colleagues up in Freiburg. They were both professors, he and Ferninghow. That Ferninghow would say that my pieces are not complicated, your pieces are complicated. And Nunes would say, no, come on, that's not at all. It's for him. This is much easier, to grasp than the Ferninghow pieces. But this is, I'm not going to get into that discussion. But what I can tell you is that the time relations are like the intervallic relations and the rhythmic relations. Very often you see So this is also integrated in this domain of relations between tempi. So, yeah, I'll just kind of skip this until I get to this moment. And this is an excerpt of the piece. Because it says Harmonic 13. So you're paying attention, I know. Now again. In different notation, and I'll explain why. Just this bit. So this here comes actually from a traditional Portuguese song that who say I'll put you the expert now. That was from his professor. It was transcribed and these things, and so this piece and all these Einspielung pieces they are dedicated to his daughter Martha, and he would sing this to her all the time, and it was her birthday. So this, which is now in the computer version, is actually I don't know if you listen to it. So I have transcribed all the tempi differences adapted into 40, so that they could all be at the same time. And then I have made a transposition from what we just heard. So this is the violin piece, more similar right now than from what we were listening to. So his version of the traditional version, and this is my version, or one of my versions of his version of the traditional version. That which then I would also use in a different way and superimpose this and so on, which is the same. And you can already see that there is a relation between time and transposition. So I'm already speaking about my music now, on purpose, of course. So this all comes from here, that you just remember, right? It's the same idea. So it's citation of the citation of the citation, and appears in many times. These types of process, I have made transformations, and I make transformations. So this, I made this. I'm already speaking about a piece of mine for choir, but from a spectrum which is not a spectrum because it's not the real thing. It's a piece for choir. I have made many sorts of transformations that you may know electronically that are not hard to find, like the distortions of ratios from 0.9 or to 1.1 or these kind of things, or pitch shift, but then electronic transformations, just put it into adapted into our accordion system. So this is, for example, plus pitch shift plus 100 hertz or less than hertz, these kind of things, and also ring modulation and so forth. This is not new. You find this in spectral music all the time, in Tristan Noir and so forth. For me, the interesting thing is not just to use the transcription, but you know where I come from. That's why I started like I did. To relate these things to other parameters, you see, in time and so forth. In this particular piece, it's a piece for 12 voices. It was just written and premiered just this year. It's a fresh piece. I use this Portuguese poem by the Portuguese poet Fernando Pessoa, but I use it in 6 different languages at the same time. And I use this sort of transformations all the time, interconnected with time and pitch and harmony and timbre and so forth. So there are a few techniques too, and I'll just play you a few examples. just to listen to these harmonic parts, which are not. Well, it's just an extra. Let's listen. Okay, but I trust you, Augustine. You're the man. So I'll finalize to say that they could study. Now, if they could study individual click tracks with all the pitches for them, for each one of them to be able to study, which I'm not sure actually if they did, but it's a French choir, so it should work. And I'll just finalize with a very short example of other piece, which then I can just. But it's just to say it's connected to spectral morphology and intermodulation of the voice with the flute and with the electronics. The name is fluxus, dimensions, sound, and it's not that the sound doesn't have a dimension, it means that very often it doesn't have one defined dimension. And this game in perception of what is happening, what kind of temper and so forth, this is the role of what I do here. And finally, please contact me. That's my website. That's my festival. Thank you very much.
We still have a couple of minutes before we go to lunch break, and so please. The questions for Jaime Reis.
This time is stronger, huh? I know.
What about the piece? What you had right at the end of your
The flute piece.
the 12 voices piece?
The 12 voices, yeah.
Because all the singers got this click to study. Did I also have the click for
No,
the
actually,
performance?
I gave them the click for my own idea of what I thought it's better. So they were produced individual clicks and a tutti click, but they haven't used it. This is a choir expert in contemporary music.
So they didn't need it. You thought they should have used it to learn.
Well, but that's normal. I say this, it's not in a wrong way to say bad things about the choir.
Yeah.
In my perspective, I think they should use it. It's not a bad thing to have a hearing aid. It is true that most of them haven't used, but in these things there is a time when I stop.
Yeah.
It's their work and we conduct, and I said, it's not my thing. But if you ask me, what do you think? Oh yeah, I mean, it's not because I spend so much time doing it, it's because I think it's really worth it. And many microtonal music nowadays, I don't know if you're aware of the work of Gerard Pape, he used to be the head of the Xenakis Center in Paris for many years, and he has special things for micro intervals in terms of tiny cents that he just uses, of course, with clicks, so that people can, and this, texture in Xenakis with it in a new way. And, so this is an important thing.
Any other question, please?
Well, then I have another, because I'm a singer, I'm so interested in the practice of performance, and I saw several singers there using the tuning fork, so they get an A, I suppose, and then did they have to find, I don't know the score so well, did they have to find microtonal intervals? From the A they get?
From the A, they would have to calculate the microtonal intervals, but usually this is done in a way that they can also relate to their colleague. To their
Yeah, of course, yeah.
next colleague, let's say.
Yeah.
Even in the way of writing it.
Yeah.
But yeah, they would have to do it.
Yeah.
Do you know how many persons of the chorus had absolute figure and how many relative?
I know that. I do know that actually many of them have perfect pitch, but I kind of have realized that they even still use the tuning fork because it's too complex and time runs off and I realized that when we head to the bar, right, after concerts, and because we have made many concerts, and then we could talk a bit more, and it was funny that they would say these kind of things, and I just feel better if I have there because of slight difference.
And did these both groups need different ways of rehearsals?
That's a very good. It requires maybe further study. I wouldn't know. Because, well, they rehearsed all in the same way actually. Because that I know. I know because they have their, it's how it is. They have their concerts. They have a whole tour. It's going to be performed again in the Lincoln Foundation just next month. This month here in July, 1st of July. And in 9 days, and then in Paris and so forth. And I know that they have, their schedule, so they all rehearse at the same time. Which runs. They also sing Emmanuel Nunes piece by memory.
By memory.
A 16-minute piece, and that's how I know them and how they got to know me, because of Nunes' work, and I remember them from Nunes speaking about that they would sing their pieces like half an hour or more of this not so easy music by heart. So, but I would like to know more about how they do it. I just don't have an idea.
Is it a secret?
Maybe, but no, I do know that it's very intensive, but I have no idea how to do it. The conductor has the score, so he gives the 18, but the musicians, they play his music by memory. And many other musicians.